All right, I'll put on the wee cap for the recap. All right, here we go. So last time, so up to this point, Artemisia's stepmother, Marcellea, who's this powerful diviner and rather controlling, came to town to try to take her away, but was instead kidnapped by night masks. And in the whole process of that, we had some adventures, and eventually that culminated in a battle with our doppelgangers of ourselves in an arena. And then we got transported to a night mask lair where Cecilia disguised herself as a high priestess of Shar, and Sterich disguised himself as a doppelganger. And then we basically conned our way into where Artemisia was being held. And then faced off against the Duchess of Darkness, who was all this vampire cleric of Shar and a real tough cookie. She kicked our booty. But in the last moment, Artemisia, in a moment of, I guess, emotional stress, managed to sort of level up and cast a dimension door that ripped a rift in space and time, and we all managed to escape through that, and that's where we left off. So I just wanted to really quickly, as part of the recap, I thought, take advantage of this, that we're traveling through a dimension door, and go through and imagine some of the dimensions some of our characters might have gone through, and see if you can guess them. I'll ask the person I'm reading it to you to guess, and then if not, the group can guess. And if not, I'm sure the chat will guess. So the first one, for an example, Rogar, I see a fellow dwarf with steel blue eyes and a grey and black beard talking to someone who looks like a 12-year-old boy with a wizened face and a huge top knot of hair, wearing a fur-lined vest. And the young gnomish-looking fellow is tugging a horse closer to the dwarf with a mischievous grin, and the dwarf sneezes like crazy. But he spots me and he says, "Flint, not another dwarf." And the dwarf Flint looks over at me with raised eyebrows and says, "Oh, you're just jealous you can't grow a beard without looking ridiculous, Taz." Funny, Taz says, and his eyes narrow at me even as his grin widens. I'm feeling suddenly bored. So, what dimension's that?
I think I have that book on my shelf, actually.
I Kryn, the World of Dragonlance, created by Weiss and Hickman. All right, so Stong, you think you hear someone say the name Mordenkainen as you pass briefly through a high tower chamber where two wizards are speaking, one gaunt and deferential seeming, the other taller and wearing blue robes with a Van Dyke beard streaked by grey stripes. And you can see laid out below the tower a great city, and even further off the ruins of a great castle. And the smaller soft-spoken wizard's eyes go wide and he says, "What on earth?" But the second wizard just smiles and says, "Be calm, Bigby. He's simply passing through." Bigby says... Then Biggie says, "Well, perhaps I should lend him a hand." Wink. So, and then you continue on. So, what dimension was that, Stong?
I'm gonna call a friend and just toss it over to the audience.
Anyone?
That was Greyhawk, wasn't it?
That's the world of Greyhawk.
Definitely the world of Greyhawk.
That's created by Gary Gygax. That's right.
That's right.
All right, Sturge.
I have that book on my shelf. All right, it's fine.
To have a map of that place. It was pretty big, too.
All right. I want to hear Sturge's.
Yeah, Sturge. You manifest briefly on a rooftop. Two men are sitting there and looking out over one of the largest and most dangerous cities you've ever seen. The first is a very tall, barbarian-looking fellow with a broadsword across his knees, and he's singing some song about being free of any rules or ruler. The second is a short, slight man in dark gray clothes who reminds you somehow of yourself. He's making odd signs with his fingers and apparently causing several nearby rats to dance the barbarian song. This arcane trickster-looking fellow glances over at you and says, "Your song has drawn a rat of another kind there, I think, Fafford." Then you continue on.
Nice.
What dimension is it?
That's the Fritz Lieber dimension.
Aye.
The Fritz Lieber dimension. Yeah.
Her dimension.
What's the name of the city, Sturge?
Lankmar.
There you go. There you go.
Nice.
Ding, good job.
Nice.
I think there is a RPG for Lankmar.
Yep, exactly. They did a
Yeah.
bunch of tie-in stuff with D&D and some
Was
of the
it
characters and
D&D?
stuff were in
Okay.
there.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
TSR
Well,
did some
D&D
stuff with them.
owes a lot of genetics to the Fashred and Grey Master stories. So yeah.
Ah,
Indeed.
Interesting.
All right,
Like two
well-
of our characters. Anyway.
I'm sad Calith isn't here, but I'll do Calith and you guys can guess. So Calith appears in what seems to be the throne room of a Gothic-looking castle.
Mm.
The air is chill, mist swirling around her feet, and she hears a distant scream of pain or horror. A pale, noble-looking man sits on the throne wearing a high-collared black coat lined with red and a blood-red jewel at his throat. He leans forward, his eyebrows raising at the sight of her. Tatiana, he says. Then he scowls as you come briefly into focus. As he meets your eyes, his scowl becomes a smile, though, and you see some predatory fangs. And he says, no, but someone with great promise, I think.
Oh.
So what dimension is that?
Oh my God. Is that Ravenloft?
That's definitely Ravenloft. Yeah.
Ravenloft.
What
Because
the
that
heck?
was the Hickmans
That's
and Bruce
her
Smith
happy
and some
place.
others.
That was
Yeah.
Count Strahd von Zarovich
Checks
right
out.
there.
Checks out.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah,
when you
exactly.
started
That's fair.
describing it, I was like, Elric of Melniboné. Move on.
Oh,
Oh.
yeah.
Then the ruby, and I was like, okay.
Yeah. All right, Artemisia. You appear on the deck of what seems to be a large ship, a galleon, though in place of sails it has wings built out to the sides like a soaring bird. You hear a great humming that vibrates the deck beneath your feet and see the peak of a giant pulsing crystal sticking up through the deck in the aft of the ship. But most of all, you feel a dropping in your stomach as you realize you're not on water, but appear to be flying among the stars, towards what looks like the curving wall of a great crystal sphere that spreads out as far as you can see in every direction. And you see a winged figure before you, and at first you think it's Calith, but she turns and you see she's human with her black hair cropped very short. So what dimension is that?
Lorebot?
I think it's
The Lord Bot-
Spelljammers?
Spelljammers.
That is definitely a
Oh.
I thought it was
Spelljammer
something
thing.
different at first, but
I'm
the
not sure
melding
if
of
it's-
D&D and space opera.
I'm not sure if it was
Hey,
something more
hey.
specific, like a specific Spelljammer story.
That
But
one I
yeah,
couldn't
that's
tell you.
definitely Spelljammer.
Well, and that was Jasmine. She's in all that other.
There you go.
Yeah, and that was primarily designed by Jeff Grubb, I believe, who wrote one of my favorite, the Curse of the Azir Bonds. I love that story. Anyway, so and Cecilia finally, you
This is
manifest.
gonna be the one I don't know.
Yeah, you manifest briefly in the midst of what appears to be a harsh desert beneath a large and brutal sun. Before you, two figures are
Nice.
battling over what appears to be a fresh kill. The first is a dragonborn wielding a giant obsidian blade. The second is a
Wow.
wizard, except rather than a book, he appears to be holding a knotted string, and as he unravels one knot in the hand, a lone bit of vegetation nearby withers away as lightning builds in his fingers. But then the wizard spots you and his eyes widen. What an Athos, he exclaims, just before the dragonborn takes advantage of the distraction to decapitate him. So, and
Happy
move
place.
on. What place is that? What dimension?
This is what's charming. I was gonna say Athos because I can't remember the series name.
All right.
It's the one. It's the prison pentad one. What is it called?
Dark Sun?
Dark
Dark
Sun.
Sun.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm like completely blanking.
One of the few ones they made property for the Sega Genesis. There was a Dark Sun game. Anyway, so
Also, there's Eberron, which is great. Done.
yes, there was also Eberron. That
Oh,
was one of my
Eberron.
follow-ups. I was going back and forth between that and Eberron.
That's fair.
Anyway,
A million years ago, I was the line editor for the Eberron novels, so it's my baby still.
so we all
Nice.
pass through these brief visions of other dimensions, and then I hand it off to the omniscient narrator god to tell us where we actually end up.